The principles of Christian manhood are so important. And what we've kind of been seeing over the last few generations and even a little bit further back than that is just this disconnect in actually passing and the legacy of wisdom and manhood from one generation to the next. So stick with us. We're actually going to answer that question next with our guest, Artur. What is up, my full power brothers? Thank you all for tuning in today. We have an actual real treat in store. We've got Artur in the studio. Actually, this is our first episode in the studio, so we're excited about that. And we're excited, obviously, about our first guest. And kind of before we get into too much of the nitty gritty and start talking about legacy of manhood and passing of wisdom and all that kind of stuff, I do want to give you guys a quick update because we are in the studio for the first time and really excited about that, and want to say a special thanks to Dr. Timothy Brown and his staff here and all the volunteers at Arden First Baptist Church in North Carolina. They made this space possible, so we're very thankful for that. And just want to shout out to them, and hopefully we can wrangle them into getting them on the show here soon as well. But if you're ever in the beautiful mountains of Western North Carolina, swing by the church and check them out, or you can connect with them on their website. It's Arden FBC. That's Arden, F as in first, B as in Baptist, C as in church.com. And you can connect with them that way. So anyway, a lot to be thankful for. And let's kind of open up with a word of prayer. Artur, would you mind opening us in prayer?
Yeah, no problem. God, we come to you today as men, as followers of you, to grow closer to you and closer to each other here. We just want to thank you for all the things you're doing. Thank you for Andrew and his vision. And thank you for him leading this and wanting to bring out manhood in other men here. We ask you to bless this time and bless the rest of our day. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, buddy. Thanks. So I know Artur because we're buddies, but just to give you guys a little idea of what he's into. I mean, he's into so many things. He's got a Bachelor of Arts from Gardner-Webb in youth discipleship. You've been on staff with the Clayton King Crossroads Summer Camp. That's kind of how we connected and met. And then you're a graduate student also at Gardner-Webb, and you're doing your master's in divinity. And recently you became the interim minister youth pastor at First Baptist Church in Shelby.
Yep.
So that's all exciting stuff, man. How do you find time in your day to keep living life, man?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know how I find time in my day.
Yeah.
It kind of just happens.
Yeah, well, that's good, man.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of relaxing time, but I try to structure it in a way I can keep up with everything I'm doing with school and with work. And now I'm balancing a new pastorate job.
Yeah, man. Exciting times.
Yeah, I'm excited.
God's kind of bringing it fast and furious to you.
It's good to be full.
Yeah.
So I'm blessed. I'd rather be full than empty right now.
I hear you, man. I hear you. So you're on the show because one, we're friends, and two, you've got this background and knowledge and everything on youth discipleship and everything. So we're kind of talking about the idea of manhood, and we see that in the Bible. Solomon writes Proverbs and everything, and we've got all this information. It says, incline your ear and pay attention, my son. And it's this idea of passing wisdom. And, kind of to kick things off, I do want to read a quick passage from Proverbs. It's actually Proverbs 4:10 through 13, and kind of use this as a little bit of a jumping off point for our conversation today. So Proverbs 4:10 through 13, it says, "Hear, my son, and accept my words, that the years of your life may be many. I have taught you the way of wisdom. I have led you in the paths of uprightness. When you walk, your step will not be hampered, and if you run, you will not stumble. Keep hold of instruction. Do not let go. Guard her, and she is your life." So, I mean, we kind of clearly see that, God's heart is this transmission, this communication of wisdom. And specifically in this passage, it's like father to son, right? So we're kind of thinking about, how some guys listening today, some of us do have kids, some of us don't have kids. How how do we kind of embody that transmission of this kind of manly wisdom from one generation to the next?
Yeah, I would say I'd be lacking in the fatherhood department.
Hey, it'll probably come, man. It'll probably
yeah,
be coming.
probably soon. For you, you have that, but I would say the whole reason I felt the calling, or I want to be a youth pastor, was due to the fact that I had a great godly man that I met through church when I was in high school, when I was a sophomore in high school at New Spring Church. His name's Alex, and Alex became like my small group leader. He was able to speak to me. We went on a lot of different like summer camps when we would do our summer camp at New Spring in Daytona called the Gauntlet, and it felt so natural. He was able to lead us in a way that I don't know. It felt very holy. It felt very like authoritative. It felt very leader driven, and not only that, but he wanted to disciple us to be able to impact another person, another friend, or when we get older, disciple more men or boys into men.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something that I really liked. And when it came time to start looking at colleges, I was like, maybe I want to start looking at places that I can do youth discipleship. And Gardner Webb was one of the only colleges that had youth discipleship as an actual degree to get. So I was like, oh, that sounds good. So I was like, that's where I need to be. And, praying through the whole time of figuring it out. And I was like, yep, that's the calling I have on my life. I see what Alex has done in my life and some of the small group guys that I was in with, and being able to do that. I was like, well, let's see where God takes me. And that now I'm here, oddly enough. That's crazy how God works. But, seeing him as just a friend that turned into, a mentor in my life that was able to impact me for other people. When I got into my summer after my junior year, I became an intern at First Baptist in Shelby, and I met a guy, his name's Harrison, and Harrison, I kind of could see a little bit of myself in. I was like, now I got to disciple him. And I was like, my whole life leading up to it is that now. And I learned that from what Alex has taught me about how, to mentor and to lead another guy who's close in age, but obviously I had a little bit maturity on him in age, and I took it and ran with it. I didn't know what I was doing, but I just was like, if I become a friend and lead them towards Jesus, I guess that's what discipling's about.
That's a win. That's always a win.
Yeah, and it's cool. And now he's doing worship leadership at Columbia International University.
How cool.
And but I like how you start off with Proverbs. We went through the summer of the coronavirus in 2020.
Yep.
We decided to go through the book of Proverbs, and something that we talked about, we read it, and every day we like FaceTimed and just talked about what we've learned or what we thought about it, and something that we continued to like go back to was it felt like a father was telling a son how to live their life, how to grow up, what to do, what not to do. Talk about if you work, you'll never be hungry, but if you don't work, you'll always, things like that. And it felt perfect for what we're doing now. And I thought Proverbs was perfect for that leadership and that manhood. One of the best manhood books in the Bible, I feel like, because it is like a father telling their son.
There's a depth of wisdom there. I mean, you could do a study in there, day after day, week after week, year after year, whatever. And so as you're kind of thinking about like Alex and how he kind of inspired this in you and kind of showed you some principles of kind of mentorship and kind of this idea of legacy and passing principles and wisdom of manhood. I've seen kind of some studies, and this is kind of where the question's coming up in my mind, where there's just such stark difference between kind of how young ladies learn or women learn and young men versus men learn. And one of the studies that's kind of coming to my mind is they actually put like young kids, like my kids' age, like 3, 1, 2, in a room, and they had some chairs and some toys, and like the little girls would put their chairs in a circle. So they like built community, and they started having conversation, and we're talking like about dollies and stuff like that. The boys every time would line their chairs up in a row and look out and be like, hey, let's go do that. And then they band together and go do something. So we have, inherently different kind of personalities and way we deal with things just based on our genders. So kind of with you and Alex, and the idea of passing manhood and manly wisdom, what would you say are the nuances and the differences to reaching men as opposed to reaching women? Like, what do we need to do differently to make sure our boys don't get left behind?
Yeah. So this Tuesday I was in class, and we were talking about, it's called grief, loss, death, and dying, which is an odd class to talk about manhood. But we were talking about how men and women think differently and feel differently and respond to crisis in a different way. And our professor was saying men think always more cognitively, not always, but they tend to think more, more cognitively, especially dealing with the loss. And females will probably be more emotionally, that's, and bringing up a death. Like I had 2 grandparents die 6 months, and I didn't show much emotion. I was like, they were getting a little older, it was just, and that's how I coped. But with my girlfriend, if things like that would happen, it would be more emotional, and she would have to like cope emotionally through it. And where I just see the answer and fix it, or see the problem and fix it. And I think I like how you said you set up guys or the boys in a line, and they, all make a decision, the girls, and you can kind of see that cognitive versus emotional. The emotional, they want to develop like a community or relationship, and the men the boys want to go and do something, and they all kind of lead.
We're super kind of like we're wired to be more like objective driven. Mm-hmm. So with that in mind, like I know that a lot of times, like with guys, if you give us, say, okay, like go volunteer at this mission or this homeless shelter, or go do campus beautification at the church or something like that, that's when we really like get on board, because we've got something like tactile that we can put our hands on. And
it's like a challenge.
Yeah, it's a challenge.
Give a challenge so they can respond to it.
Exactly.
And females don't always want a challenge to go respond to in that sense, whereas men, I feel like they do want something they can take ownership of. And I think that's the big thing with youth as well, is giving like a young man, speaking in terms of youth ministry, give them something to take ownership of, so they can feel proud of, so they can feel like they've done something. And I feel like that's a big, why don't you take a challenge? Why don't you bring 2 friends new to church this Wednesday or this Sunday?
And that's a finite goal that they can grab onto, and they're, they can feel good when they succeed that. I like that. Yeah.
So I feel like that's, being a leader is giving an attainable goal, but challenging enough, high invitation, high challenge.
I like that.
Is like what I would say, kind of towards that, trying to lead men so they can feel accomplished when they get something done, or you can say, hey, this is where you strayed away a little bit, and we can get you back on the path, whatever it might be.
It's kind of like that. I don't know if you've read Wild at Heart, maybe. So good book. I recommend it. And I read it a long time ago, so it's kind of a little foggy at this point in my mind. But the idea is that we as men, we want to be on adventure, like, to go to your point, a challenge. We want to be on adventure. And I think it's just so significant, the idea of being on mission with God. We're actually doing something. It doesn't matter if you work for UPS and you deliver parcels, or you're a pastor, or you're on the mission field. It doesn't matter what you're actually doing. You're on mission, and you're on ministry. And with the idea of next generation, how do we pass that kind of ownership and buy-in on God's mission and that purpose, trying to find the manly purpose for our lives? How do we pass that, like, from our generation down to the next generation?
Yeah, I feel like I'm running into that now with when I'm taking this new job, is how do I pass on what I have to these younger boys in the youth ministry? And that's something that I feel like is going to be my whole next season. And it starts with setting the parameters of what a manly like life looks like, what a Christ filled life looks like. And I think because some of them don't have father figures at home, and that's the biggest thing is like now whatever I do, they're gonna see as a father figure, and I think passing it on should, point straight to the Bible with whatever you're dealing with. Show them other godly men to look at, to model themselves. Show them, what's wrong and what's right, because some kids really just don't know what's wrong and what's right, according to moral and Christian ethics and standards.
And not to interrupt, but I think you kind of alluded and touched on a really important point. You said taking everything back to the Bible, and I think foundationally, like, we need to know as men that the only way we can have the full power, if you want to call it that, to be able to walk out this passing of wisdom is through God's power. And the only way we do that is when we stay rooted in Scripture and in prayer and in His presence. So I think that's huge. And kind of before we were kind of talking and just hanging out informally before the show, we were talking a little bit about the role of, the church in this, and also, outside of that, the family. So what are the responsibilities of the family first? Because I think we probably agree that, discipleship needs to happen in the home first, and then kind of the church is the extension of that. So where are the delineation of responsibilities there in your experience?
Yeah. So it's funny. That was one of the questions they asked me. Now I interviewed, and how would you bring the family along in your ministry? And I was like, well, I don't want to sound like I don't care about my job, but I can only do so much for the kids. At some point, the parents or whoever they have at home have to kind of take ownership of their own child to lead them, because they can only get so much out of coming to church a few times a week, if that. So I think it's speaking into the parents too, giving them easily attainable goals. When I send the kids home, like, make sure that they can the parents will know what they learned on a Wednesday night or a Sunday or whatever, and also making sure that the parents have people surrounding them from our church too, because I don't want to be the only one like wanting to drag them to church, because
you don't do ministry in a vacuum. It's community.
So I think it's finding a good group for them to be in, whether it's a Sunday school class or a small group or whatever it is. But I really think that it starts with the parents, because they're the first contact and the last contact the kids will see each and every day. And I think if they are leading a godly life, the kids are going to be more like in tune with, maybe I want to do that too. And then when they see me, it's just easier. So I'm not the one pointing fingers at them. Like, they feel like I'm trying to be their parent or something.
You're kind of coming along, and the way it should work is you're just kind of reinforcing what dad's leading from home. Right. And, I'm
more of a cooler level. I want to be like, the cool friend and like kind of a leadership figure. I don't want to be telling them like, you can't do this, can't do that. I want to be the one encourage them to do the right thing. I don't want to be the one them coming in feeling like this is.
You want to be winsome. Office. You don't want to be the taskmaster. You don't want to be like the guy with the ruler. We can't. I don't think we can do this at school, but wrap them on the wrist or something like that. Yeah. And so as you've kind of journeyed through ministry, with Crossroads and with working with youth and everything, what would you say the biggest story that you've seen of kind of like the generational pass of manly wisdom? What's kind of the biggest story you've encountered in your journey so far?
Yeah. So when I was like in high school, I was, I guess, a freshman, and I wasn't going to church at that point. I really wanted to, but I didn't have anywhere to go. And one of the captains on our wrestling team, he went to New Spring, and he would go, Wednesdays and Sundays, and he would always ask the team, hey, you want to go to church with me Wednesday after practice? I'm like, oh, like I got to get home. I got to go shower. I got to go do my homework. I was like, it's just not good. But then like once wrestling season ended, I was like, okay, I'll go. So I went, and then that was like what started me on my path of like, then like the next step was like, I want to be baptized.
Yeah.
Next step was start serving in the church. I saw how every time like I showed up, there was a next step for me to take, and there was some man telling me, or encourage me like what that next step is. And I feel like that would be like generational because it continued.
Yeah.
Like, and right now I have a next step.
Yeah.
I don't know really what it is because I have a bunch of next steps at my doorstep right now. But for me, it was like, I first it was just like an invitation to come to church.
Yep.
Then it was like, I'm already saved. Like, what's the next step? And then I'm talking to the guy on the wrestling team. He's like, hey, I'm getting baptized. It was in Ingles. He was checking me out at Ingles, and he was like, hey, I'm getting baptized May 5th. Have you thought about it? And I was like, no. I went home and I was like, hey, Mom, like, I want to get baptized. She's like, perfect. So like,
let's do that.
So I did it with the guy on the wrestling team.
That's fantastic.
And so then it was like, all right, what's next? Now I got to start serving. So it kind of like, there was always someone speaking into me about doing the next step. And I think that's like, we never want to be a stagnant character.
Right.
Like, you want to be dynamic. Yeah. So you want to continue to grow. Like, I mean, that I hope that for my whole life, that I'm 80 years old, I'm still like, oh, what's my next step for me to do? So.
And I think we don't want to miss this too, that you kind of talked about this kind of highway continuum. You've got all these different on-ramps, maybe your on-ramp is salvation. Maybe your on-ramp is baptism. Maybe your on-ramp is like you getting plugged in with the church, maybe it's discipleship, whatever it is. I'd encourage all of us to prayerfully consider what our next step is and what our on-ramp is to get on mission with God, and, not be bashful from stepping up and doing that, because what that allows us to do is when we're on that path with God, this generational path of wisdom is just kind of a natural flow, because God's pouring wisdom into us, and then he's also bringing people into our sphere that we're able to pour into as well. And, if you were to say kind of maybe 2 or 3 different principles, what would you say like really key nuggets of wisdom are that we need to like intentionally make sure that kids, young men hear about, that we share with them?
Yeah, it'd be easy to say prayer and like stuff like that.
Holy answers. You win. You get 100%. You pass the test.
I would say growth would be one.
Okay. Yeah.
Kind of what we touched on last. Like I look over my life and I see how I always had someone to challenge me to grow. So I think like a healthy challenge of growth is like something I want to pour into my youth ministry. I feel like that's kind of like a foundational thing that kids can look up to and men can look up to. What we talked about, challenge,
Yeah.
2, I would really have to say like being someone that is a leader. I have a class called Leadership and Administration, and we always talk about the difference of being a leader and just having power.
Yeah.
So I think being a leader, because if you're a good leader, people are going to want to follow you. Men, I feel like, are just born leaders.
Yep.
Not all the time and not always, but a lot of, we just have that like yearning of like to grow
Take
up and
charge.
do things and, have the power and have people to lead and be a good leader and a thoughtful leader. So I think being a leader would be one. And then 3rd, I think is just being able to have like accountability.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing with teenagers and college students, is because they're kind of on their own, but not really. And they need someone to have accountability over them. And that was something for me that I always had. And with friends and with Alex, he was always able to keep me accountable and show me like what to do in this situation. Is like, are you living a Christian life? Are you living this life that you want to be living? Are you sure that's like what you should be doing? Have you talked to God about things like that? And I feel like that's what I was able to do with Harrison when he was looking for colleges, when he was seeing what he wanted to do with his life, his relationships, and able to keep accountability, and not me just, calling him, hey, what are you doing? It was him coming to me to keep, ask me to keep him accountable, which I like. Yeah. So I'm not just like you said, I'm just hitting people. You did bad, you did bad, you did bad. No, exactly. You did good,
And I think that's awesome. So you've got growth, you've got being a leader, and you've got the accountability. And I really like the idea of accountability. I like all of them, but I think the real key with accountability, and some people really miss this, is just 100% transparency. So you're not going to have accountability with everybody. It's going to be a very close-knit group. And I think it's equally as important for the generation that's pouring in as the generation that's being poured into, because again, we have to, like you were talking about, you've got your platform and people are looking to you as a father figure. They're looking to you for leadership, the passage of that manly wisdom and knowledge. And to be able to achieve that, you have to have that close-knit group of guys around you to provide that accountability, to encourage you to be the leader, and then to keep you kind of on path with growth with God. And so I think all those are very huge. I think at its core, there's discipleship and evangelism as well, because we've kind of been talking on the premise that for the most part, the next generation's already arrived, right? They're already Christ followers or on Team Jesus. So what can we do, not to be that taskmaster, but to be winsome? There's always generational differences, like stuff that connects with me and you. It doesn't necessarily connect with folks older than us or connects with folks younger than us. So specifically, as we're thinking about younger generations, what do we need to position ourselves to do? Is there technologies we need to learn? Do I have to get back on social media? I mean, what do I have to do to make sure that I'm intentionally winsome for the next generation and not off-putting?
I think you just have to be open is the first thing, like open line, be honest. And that's what happened with me yesterday when I was in the men's ministry, small group. Just be honest with them. When they come to you about questions, don't tell them just what they want to hear, because then they're not going to grow. They're not going to be challenged. They're going to stay that cozy feeling of wanting to just sit and nothing will ever happen. So I think being able to be honest with people, be intentional with people. And then as far as generational, as is probably more so me going up in generation, talking to them, because that's where I'm at in the church, is try to appeal to them a little bit too.
Right.
So they don't feel like you're just trying to kick them out of the church and bring in new blood, which you don't want to do, but you do have to bring in that fresh idea, that freshness to the church, those new Christians or the wannabe new Christians, so you can have someone to lead.
And it's that beautiful blend of the wisdom and everything that the older generation brings to the table, and the vibrance and the creativity that the younger generation brings to the table. And something that our pastor talks about a lot is the message doesn't change. So the gospel is always the gospel, right? And the Bible is always the Bible, but the methods change. And kind of we were talking about it. The idea is, even Jesus used the technology of the day. He went out in a boat, when all the people were pressing into him and, he couldn't get to a place where people could see him and hear him. He'd go out in the boat on the lake, so he'd look out and broadcast his voice. So he was using that technology as being winsome with what he had then in that generation. And I think, that kind of goes with what we're talking about here.
Yeah, Jesus adapted to whoever he needed to talk to. And I think that's a great sign, is you can show that straight to the people you're dealing with. In my case, the older generation in a church, show that Jesus did this. And it's like we're not putting ourselves as a deficit. We can just be just like Jesus, and then that will in turn facilitate what we're going to do about bringing new people in. But I do like, you want to stick with the wisdom and the people that have been there, but at the same time, you want to rejuvenate that church. And I think you're at a crossroads when you don't want to be too pushy,
right?
And you want to do it in a respectful manner.
Yeah.
But I think that's why you got to appeal to people.
Yeah.
Because when you appeal to them and be like, look, you remember what it looked like in the 70s when this church was full every Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you want to bring it back to that? And they're like, oh, I do want to bring it back to that.
Yeah.
So then it's like, it has that vision in their heads like, oh, like we can do that.
Yeah.
So like, what haven't we done, or what did we do then to get people here?
Yeah.
Why don't we just start back again instead of being in our bored and cozy state?
Yeah.
So I think that's it. It's like, don't you want to do this? And then it kind of just like dangles the food out in front of them. And they're like, okay, I'll go do that. And you just let them hook on.
Yeah. I think that's good. I think two things, that makes me think of this kind of like tweetable comment, mission over comfort. Mm-hmm. And, the idea of not getting complacent or comfortable where we are. But also, I think you kind of temper a lot of that with, again, that kind of blend of the wisdom with the vibrance and everything. And to be able to get to that point, you have to talk, this kind of goes back to my sales, background and everything in real estate. They always talk about what's your big why. Why do you do what you're doing? Why are you in real estate every day? Why do you get up and do what you do? So to appeal to people, especially generationally, you have to bring them back to what their big why is. And for us as Christian men, our big why is God's glorification and the advancement of the kingdom. And, whether it's a church that's, losing numbers and losing ground in the community, return to your big why. The Bible calls it return to your first love, get back to that vibrant pursuit and love of Jesus, and everything else is going to fall into place. And, if it's talking to the younger generation, get back to what their big why is. What is your big why? Well, it's, making Jesus' name famous, in my school or, in my place of work or whatever the case may be. And so I think bringing us back to the big why is just so huge.
Yeah. And you brought up numbers. People say, oh, it's not about the numbers. And it's truly not, because at the end of the day, it's whatever you're doing with the people that are there and how much you want to grow the people in there. But you want to get new people into that church, mm-hmm. because I don't necessarily want to take people from another church to bring them in, but I want to reach the people who are not in church, or who might have left church, or who even left our church.
Yeah.
To and speaking, mostly of the youth.
Mm-hmm.
So it's easy to get the youth there. A lot of times it's not always easy to get the parents or maybe the adults. So I think whenever we start dealing with numbers in a sense of seeing, look how healthy our church is, that's when you want to measure those numbers, and you don't want to always just be like, oh, we have this many people coming.
Right.
Well, what do you do with them?
Yeah. Is there
they're
depth?
Just here.
You just don't want to be wide, and you need to have width and mm-hmm. depth. Yep. I think that's so good, man. And, if we kind of think about the idea, kids are being birthed every day, right? So new people are coming onto this planet. And if we're not being winsome and opening the church doors and inviting people in, we're losing ground. That's just the way it is. So I think, as we fight this battle, it's obviously a spiritual battle. It's something that we can't do in our flesh as men. It's something that we can only do in partnership with God. So I kind of want to invite him into this and to build us up in that. So let's go to him in prayer real quick. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for being able to hang out with Artur today, just to talk about, passing manly wisdom and your precepts from one generation to the next. And even in some instances, having younger generations speaking to older generations. And we just know that this is not something that is easily done. It's a big challenge. It's a big undertaking. And the cool thing is you've wired us as men to rise up to the challenges and to get excited about adventure. And we just ask that you give us the opportunities to share your wisdom, and also the insight to listen to the Holy Spirit and his promptings on what to share and when to share it. And we just know that all that will be for your glory and the advancement of the kingdom, and we trust you with the outcome. In Christ's name, amen. Artur, thanks so much for being on the show, man. And for all the listeners today, in case you guys didn't know, you can find us on all your favorite podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, et cetera, et cetera. We typically do new shows every Tuesday, and then we've got specials and testimonials that get dropped kind of sporadically as God brings people to the ministry. So that's kind of how we do that. And if you guys want to connect with us, we'd love to hear your stories. shoot us an email. The easiest way to get a hold of us is connect@fullpowermen.com. Again, that's connect@fullpowermen.com. And Artur, how can people connect with you?
Yeah, so I have Facebook, and it's just my name, Artur Hofer, and then on Twitter is Hofer_Artur.
All right, Facebook and Twitter.
Yeah,
Get up with Artur. He's got good things to share. So, guys, appreciate y'all tuning in. And as always, you're loved, you're sent. Be blessed out there, and make generational passing of manhood wisdom a priority and a focus. And just get out of here, and we'll catch you next time. Be good.